The history of YouTube began, not with a bang, but with a whimper. The site launched in beta form in mid-2005, during which time numerous test videos and other oddities were uploaded to the site. But by the time YouTube was a few years old, there was this sensationalism which had grown around the platform. So many people had come to know it as a place to express a sort of sporadic creative energy, where they could post skits they filmed on the weekend or music video edits of their favorite franchises. And suddenly, there was this question in people's minds. Was it possible that YouTube could become so massive that someone could cross over from the internet to mainstream culture? In a way, it must have felt inevitable that someone would be able to do this. Someone would make something so out there, so amazing, that it would grow bigger than anyone could have possibly expected. It was really just a question of who was going to be the first person to do it right. And then, on October 30th, 2006, the world was introduced to Fred Figglehorn.
Hey, it's Fred!
Fred is a phenomenon which was notable not just for the size of the sound wave, but in the way that it reverberated throughout culture. After Lucas Cruikshank began posting the weekly web series, the once backyard filmmaker became a recognized celebrity, and a face that almost any kid on the playground could recognize without struggle. Before his time in the spotlight had passed, Lucas or his creation would appear on Nickelodeon, the Disney Channel, and Cartoon Network, the three Goliaths of children's entertainment in that era. And suddenly, Fred wasn't just a YouTube channel. He was a film series, he was a TV show, he was a talking pen. He had plushies and board games and books that you would just run into casually when you weren't looking for them. Lonely Girl 15 might have been the first YouTube celebrity, but Fred was the first YouTube God. And then, one day, there was nothing. No movies, no spin-offs, not even a talk show to his name. Fred went from a rock star, something that you almost couldn't avoid, to something no one wanted to talk about. Why was Fred such a big deal? What untold sacrifices had to be made to make him fit for television? And why did the character's popularity plummet so hard in those final years? Before this video is over, I'm going to be answering all of these questions. But first, a quick note before we get too far into this. Some of my longtime viewers will know that I actually talked about Fred very briefly in one of the earliest Fallen Titans episodes, discussing internet comedy pioneers. But like a lot of those early videos, I think I didn't go far enough in exploring this specific story. I just wanted to give it a passing mention so people wouldn't keep asking me to talk about it, because I really did not want to rewatch all the Fred videos. But since then, I have really developed an honest fascination with Fred content. And this time around, I don't want to just play a clip of Fred screaming, say why was this popular, and then move on to something else. I really honestly want to understand why he was popular. And so I'm going to be absorbing every video, every movie, every side project, everything in the Cruikshank think tank, the entire Fred canon. And then I want to pass everything I learned on to you, so I can ruin your brain as well. And additionally, I want to say that this video is going to have a kind of similar tone and presentation to another video I'm working on right now, Wink. It's a video I've actually been working on for some time, Wink. And if everything goes right, that video is going to be the one that will come after this video, Double Wink. And so if you don't want to miss out on the massive channel-wide story arc that we're about to embark on, then I really recommend you go down and you hit subscribe. With that, let's dive in to the Cruikshank Think Tank. We already did that one, didn't we? With that, let's get into my op-ed op Fred. These all suck. Let's just do it. Let's just get into it. Oh, hey! Didn't see you there, sorry. I was just texting on my Zip It. a fantastic device for all ages 6 to 15. So I didn't actually record this video all in one sitting like I usually do, because I realized pretty early on that if I were to wait until the script is 100% finished, then record it all in one sitting, and then send it off to one editor, that it would take them a million years to turn all that content around. So it made a little more sense to write a little bit, then record that and send it to an editor, then write a little more bit and record that and send it to a different editor, and at that pace we had sort of a realistic milestone in terms of when we were going to be able to get this out. And I kind of figured, what the hell, if visual continuity isn't a thing we can pull off this time, why don't we play into that? Why don't we try and see what kind of different outfits I can pull together every single time I film? And I eventually realized that it would be a great idea to bring back our longtime sponsor, GlassesUSA.com. GlassesUSA.com is a fantastic website that sells over 9,000 styles of quality eyeglasses and sunglasses, sending them directly to your door. Because GlassesUSA.com cuts out the middleman, they can save you up to 70% on select frames, with some starting as low as $30. Going out to some store and getting charged hundreds of dollars for a pair of frames not worth hundreds of dollars is something that I think we should officially leave in a pre-pandemic world. And GlassesUSA.com gives you just the tools to do that. Like the virtual mirror that lets you try on your favorites from the comfort of home. Once you choose your frames, just upload your prescription and GlassesUSA.com sends them to you with free shipping and free returns. So there's literally no risk. If you get a pair of frames and you decide they're not your thing, you can just send them back entirely for free. Throughout the course of this video, I will be occasionally swapping glasses and outfits, and whenever that happens, pay attention to the name of the glasses in the corner of the screen. So if you like what you see, go down to the description for links to my frames and a special discount just for you, my viewers, on any frames that you guys end up picking out. With that, let's get into this. So what is it about Fred that made it so inexplicably huge? Why does it occasionally linger as a cultural remnant, and why are we talking about it here today? To find out, let's jump back to the true first page of this story, which can be found on the YouTube page JKL Production. JKL Production was a collaboration between three tween-aged cousins, John Smet, Katie Smet, and Lucas Cruikshank. Lucas lived in Nebraska while his cousins lived in Wisconsin, and when visiting each other in June of 2006, they started recording skits together and uploading them to YouTube. That month, they posted one of their biggest videos, a choreographed dance to the Hannah Montana theme, which today has over 1 million views. They then followed this up with a sequel, which today has nearly 10 million views. As you can tell, these three happen to be pretty big Montana stans. And in October of that same year, they managed to attend a concert hosted by the Disney Channel star, which they released an energetic video blog discussing.
Tell them how me and John were the only boys there.
Oh. John and Lucas were like the only teenage boys there.
I was like jamming out way more than any of the girls during that GNO song.
You're the only person that knew every single word.
I was jamming out so bad in girls GNO. But I was so mad at Miley Cyrus because
she said, are all the girls here having a good night? And I cried.
Lol.
Rafflecopter.
As a reminder, these three lived in different states, and when they weren't visiting each other for vacations or holidays, they were typically recording solo videos apart from each other. Around this stage, Lucas began experimenting with character videos, where he would create a funny personality out of thin air and then act it out in his basement for his own personal amusement. Some of these include Jeffy Jeff, Richard the Great, and the Man Who Is Always Happy.
I've been diagnosed with a serious disease. He says I have a disease where I think I'm always happy. I'm even happy when the worst things happen. Stewie, one of your classmates just died. That's okay.
But it was on October 30th, 2006 that JKL Production uploaded the video that would ultimately come to change Lucas's life forever. Fred on Halloween. As I was watching through many of these early Fred uploads, I realized that the show is remarkably similar to another series which I've previously analyzed on Fallen Titans. That being Lonely Girl 15, which started 5 months before the first Fred video and featured a very similar presentation. Both shows were created in imitation of YouTube vloggers of the day, and both attempted to hide dark elements within their respective shows that the audience was supposed to decipher. With Lonely Girl 15, you were supposed to slowly piece together that Bree's parents are part of a cult who plans to sacrifice her. And with Fred, you're supposed to pay close attention to details he discusses about his broken family and various other problems at home. The main differences are obviously that Lonely Girl 15 was a serious drama created by a group of 27-year-old directors and producers, and Fred was a black comedy series written and acted out by a 13-year-old. Someone so young that the creator in question doesn't seem to remember anything about creating the show.
The weird thing is that I don't remember filming that. I don't really remember anything else from the rest of the week. I actually didn't remember that it ended that way. I don't remember filming it, but I don't remember that. What happened to that memory? I don't know. It's actually so creepy watching these videos because it doesn't feel like that's me.
There's a term in literature called death of the author, which essentially states that analyzing a creator in order to understand a creation is typically futile, especially if the creator has since died and thus has no input on how their work is to be interpreted. Well, in this case, I think the proper term is puberty of the author, but pretty much all of the same ideas still apply. We can't go back and interview 2007 Lucas Cruikshank to understand his vision, so the only thing we can do is try to decipher meaning only from the content which is sitting before us. So with that in mind, the following is my understanding of the lore and purpose of early Fred videos based only on what I can glean from said videos. This is all going to be very notable to take in, because when Nickelodeon buys the rights to Fred later in the timeline, most of this information is either ignored or heavily altered. And there are really 2 or 3 soft reboots that end up happening inside of the Fred canon. So in the first several videos, Fred is described as a 5-year-old child, vlogging about his experiences and things going on in his life. In his first video, Fred on Halloween, Fred is spending his All Hallows Eve alone at home, sulking. We learn that his mother was supposed to take him out trick-or-treating, but went out partying instead, and doesn't get back until around 4 a.m. At the end of the video, we actually meet Fred's mother, in the flesh, who is actually also played by Cruikshank. This never happens again for the rest of the series, but if we take it at face value, it's a pretty interesting window into the things that Fred has grown up with.
I don't want to make you turn into a frickin' alcoholic, frickin' stupid idiot like me when you grow up.
I say take it face value because one of the most important themes that early Fred videos set up is that Fred is not a reliable narrator. Like many 5-year-olds, he's prone to making things up to be dramatic and telling stories which exist only in his mind because he thinks it makes things more interesting.
Earlier, I lit one of those tanks that like the firework at the end of it, and I lit it, and it turned into a real tank. It was like blowing down people's houses. And last time I tried to go into their yard, they got these shotguns, and they were like, shoot, you get out of my yard or I'll shoot. And I was just like, oh, get out, okay, just shut up. You don't yell at people like that. This is the real world.
So some of the oddest details about these Fred videos perhaps are not totally legitimate within the story itself, but there are some concrete details. Due almost certainly to his destructive home, Fred suffers from extreme anger issues, which result in several tantrums throughout the series.
When I get angry, I do things that I regret later. I don't!
In the first episode of the show, he breaks his family's PlayStation and is then prescribed pills which are supposed to help him control his anger, which he secretly stops taking almost immediately. In his second video, he casually mentions that his mother has left him wine to drink if he gets bored. And in the 2007 Christmas special, it's said that he's being watched by his aunt because his mother is in rehab. Perhaps owning up again to Fred's tendencies to lie to the audience, the world we understand to exist around him is particularly targeted at being cruel to him and him alone. In the 2008 Valentine's Day episode, he is given a Zip-It, which he uses to text Judy, a girl from his school that he has a crush on. Judy immediately texts him back with a string of cruel messages that seem totally unprovoked.
Fred, you are a useless scumbag. I would never, ever, 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 exclamation point, ever text message anyone like you. You're extremely ugly. P.S. Your thighs jiggle really violently when you run in PE class. Now that's just plain mean.
Now I know what you guys are thinking. Quentin, what the fuck is a Zip-It? Well, you see, the Zip-It was a wireless device released in 2005, which could be used to instantly message people, although one had to use a pre-existing online service, like AOL Online or Yahoo Messenger. A second version of the Zip-It, the Z2, was released in 2007, and the company apparently was desperate for any way to get it off of store shelves. You see, 8 months before the Z2 came out, the iPhone was announced by Steve Jobs, which would go on to revolutionize how we consume media and live our lives. So the instant that the Zip-It second incarnation was announced, it was basically an overpriced paperweight. So the idea that the company apparently came up with was to use the popularity of the Fred character to sell their useless piece of crap. They thus commissioned Fred to begin using their technology in his videos, plugging them by name, and clearly stating what it was supposed to be used for. Fred even recorded 2 exclusive episodes of his show, which were uploaded to the Zip-It Wireless YouTube page, although today they are unlisted. My favorite fact about these 2 Fred videos is that Fred fans actually don't consider them to be canon, because they include the detail that Fred has several step-siblings, which is never mentioned in the series again. And I don't know, I just find it really amusing that there was once a strong enough Fred fan base that they had honest-to-God debates about what was canon in the Fred universe. Now, Fred wasn't the first YouTuber to do sponsored material. That honor goes once again to Lonely Girl 15. But this is all an interesting example of how ads on early YouTube materialized in a way that was far more subtle than YouTube content today by glasses. But this also shows that despite being a show about a 6-year-old being emotionally abused by his alcoholic mother, Fred was something that brands found immediately appealing. Perhaps just because it was one of the first in a new line of media. And to reflect on this gained notoriety, Fred made some major changes at this stage of the game. Most importantly, Lucas left JKL Production, moving to a new channel just for Fred, where he re-uploaded all of his Fred skits before deleting almost everything from the JLK YouTube page. Fred then changed from a fun amusement that Lucas did a few times a year into something that he did weekly, which I presume he was making a ton of money off of, considering that within the next year, he would have 3 different sponsor deals with different brands. Whether Lucas intended it or not, Fred was now a brand, and it was about time he started acting like it.
I don't know if you already realized this, but my mom got me a Fred shirt. She said that we can't afford to get a lot of shirts, so I'm just gonna wear this shirt for the rest of my life. No offense to you guys who have a ton of shirts, but it's more cool just to have one shirt. I hope I didn't offend anybody.
Now there are 2 other Fred lore characters who were introduced at this point in the game. Kevin and Bertha, who like all the others, exist off-screen at this point. Kevin is first introduced as a neighbor who Fred has numerous negative encounters with, starting with the Mayday episode. Fred consistently describes Kevin as someone who is overweight, and also as one of the popular kids in kindergarten who he envies deeply. Now, Fred being in kindergarten at this point in the game is a bit of a plot hole because he's actually stated to be returning to school, and he's been in school earlier in different YouTube videos, but let's take one step at a time here. The other character we meet at this point is Bertha, the daughter of one of Fred's mother's drinking buddies. Bertha is described as a cool, older kid in the 2nd grade, who Fred has a crush on despite her being quite cruel to him. And that's basically the setup for the Fred show as it existed in 2008. Each week, different unique stories would play out in his life, set up one after the other with plot points being carefully set up and executed. Fred gets into misadventures, he finds some wacky reaction to it all, and then his mother says something that she probably shouldn't.
Fred, don't take off any of your clothes in front of that camera unless someone pays you.
Mom, I know you've told me 100 times.
And obviously, every character except for him exists off screen at this stage, like Vern from Hey Vern, It's Ernest, or Stinky Peterson from The New Red Green Show. In Fred Stalks Judy, Fred goes to Judy's house to try and deliver her a gift, only to discover that her house is empty. Finding the front door unlocked, Fred goes inside and begins going through her things, discovering that she has feelings for Kevin before he is chased out of her home when Judy gets home with her parents. In Fred Goes to the Dentist, Fred gets some of his cavities filled and begins screaming. I won't play you anything from this one because I like you. It's in June 2008's Fred on Father's Day that we are introduced to one of the most essential pieces of Fred lore, that he doesn't know who his father is. Apparently, up to this point, his mother has told him that his father is a famous rock star who just got up and left one day, an obvious lie that he still believes. However, when Fred asks about him in this video, his mother tells a different story entirely.
Mom, how come we never visit Dad?
Because he's on death row.
What?
In Fred Meets Bertha, Fred's mom takes him to a bar, where he waits outside and meets Bertha for the first time. Bertha's mom then takes him home, but in a shocking twist, Fred's mother never returns from the bar. And after a week, Fred records a video begging for anyone to help find her.
Okay, this is what the flyer's gonna look like. My mom is missing. Help! And I even drew a picture of her so they can find her better. A common place you could find my mom is obviously the bar. You could also find my mom standing on corners wearing revealing outfits. She's never really told me why she does that, but she said it somehow makes her money. Who knows?
In the next several videos, Fred is living with his grandmother, who initially doesn't tell him where his mother went. However, she eventually reveals that she is gone because she suddenly re-entered rehab. A disturbing detail when you consider that for at least a week, no one in Fred's family cared to tell him or look after him. Fred's grandmother also stains Fred's shirt, causing it to turn red for the rest of the season's storyline, leading to what fans have called the Red Shirt arc. A lot of stuff goes on during the Red Shirt arc, including a ton of stuff which is sadly never resolved. Fred tries to get in contact with his father by sending mail to the state penitentiary, but never gets back with him. On top of this, he continues to get threatening letters and messages from the person who allegedly once owned his YouTube channel. According to what I've been able to piece together, YouTube.com/Fred was once owned by someone else when Fred originally started, and it's my guess that the original owner gifted the YouTube channel to Lucas so that when you typed in YouTube.com/Fred, it would go immediately to Fred videos. This is why the Fred YouTube page actually predates the character by over a year, something which the character makes fun of within the show itself.
But for some reason, my Fred channel on YouTube says that I joined 2 years ago. If I would have joined 2 years ago, I would only be 4 years old. Do you really think I know how to work a computer if I was 4? So yeah, it wasn't actually my channel. I just was annoying YouTube and kept on banging on their, door. And finally they said, okay, we'll give you the channel.
And so for the 2008 arc, there was this running joke that the original owner of the account was sending threatening letters to Fred in order to try and get the account back. Eventually, Fred's mother gets out of rehab and begins treating him like a real 6-year-old, giving him love and attention, all things he's not used to and finds very unusual. However, this doesn't last very long, and she apparently begins drinking again right away. My favorite detail of this specific era of Fred is that Lucas went out of his way to make sure that the character constantly refers to things going on in the real world, as if to ground Fred's ridiculous adventures around real things that have become historically important.
Oh, and also my grandma and my mom have been talking about how the economy is crashing or something really stupid like that. And they're all worrying that we're going to go into the Great Depression or something really stupid like that. And I mean, they should just realize that we should all just sit back and relax and let the president take care of it, because he'll take care of it. Just wait and see. I mean, presidents do that kind of stuff. It's their duty.
In October 2008, a brief storyline begins where Fred runs for president of his kindergarten class, running on such promises as more homework so kids have things to do at home, and end recess so lonely kids don't have to feel bad on the playground. In response to this, Kevin himself runs against Fred, campaigning on such slogans as Fred wants to cancel recess and Fred literally broke into Judy's house.
Oh my gosh, and a really embarrassing thing that happened today was Judy was walking around the school telling everyone, why would you vote for Fred? He stalked me and went into my house. I mean, seriously, Judy was making it sound way worse than it really was. The worst thing I've ever done to Judy is walk into her house when no one was home and look through her drawers and look at all of her personal items. I mean, it wasn't that bad.
And And so election day comes, and when the votes are tallied, neither Fred nor Kevin are elected into office. Instead, a third-party candidate who did not run on personal attacks becomes their kindergarten president. Fred is initially distraught over this before deciding that he and Kevin deserved to lose because they were being sour pickles.
So my advice to you is to just be a sweet pickle and everything will turn out for you in life. Everything.
Another thing notable about this storyline is its inclusion of 2 more bizarre advertisements disguised as regular Fred content. The first was for the song Watch How I Do It by Kev Blaze, which Fred played numerous times throughout the year.
Yeah, get down with your gangsters there.
This might initially seem like Lucas or his family just really liked this song, but the eventual release of a music video for the song, starring the musician, on the Fred channel seems to confirm that this was actually a targeted marketing stunt. But the stranger of these 2 stunts came from the film studio 20th Century Fox. You see, in 2008, Fox released a science fiction adventure movie called City of Ember, produced by Tom Hanks and starring Bill Murray. And Fox decided that the best person to promote this was a 14-year-old on YouTube pretending to be a 6-year-old.
Over the summer, Bertha had to read a book called City of Ember or something, and I guess now it's gonna be a movie? Anyways, I guess in the book everyone lives underground or something, so we played a game where we lived underground.
Yes, Lucas was officially paid to promote City of Ember, and did so by having Fred mention the movie and then post an edited version of the film's trailer, inserting his face into random moments.
I'm just really scared about that. I don't know what to do. What can I do? I love swimming. Oh my god, I just peed inside the pool.
The clip you're seeing right now might seem like a fan edit or something Lucas threw together for fun, but it's actually a licensed edit approved by the City of Ember producers, who paid Fred to upload it to his channel. And I want to meet the person who thought this was a good idea, who thought that this was a good way to sell their sci-fi dystopian thriller. But on the other hand, this fake Fred edit has 7 times as many views as the actual movie's trailer. But on the other hand, the movie bombed, so it probably still wasn't the best way to get the word out. But with that out of the way, the presidential storyline ends the 2008 run of Fred videos, which is notable because 2009 Fred is kind of a transitional period for the character. You see, I consider there to be 3 main eras of Fred content: pre-Nickelodeon, Nickelodeon, and post-Nickelodeon. And I don't personally think that the Nickelodeon era begins until 2010, but 2009 was still in that space where it was clear that something was going on. In fact, the very first thing to happen with the character in 2009 was Fred's appearance on iCarly, which obviously was the very beginning of his association with Nickelodeon. 2009 was also the year that he started having widespread merchandise, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The iCarly episode featuring Lucas was actually something that I analyzed heavily in my original Fred video, and it's also something that I'm going to probably have to reanalyze at some point in my iCarly sextology. But I would be doing a disservice if I glossed over it without just highlighting how weird it is that this happened in the first place. So this episode mostly features Lucas appearing as a fictionalized version of himself, as the in-universe Lucas starts drama with the iCarly cast. We'll go ahead and save these bits of the episode for the main iCarly project. But what we will discuss very briefly here is the sequences where Lucas appears as himself as Fred. Early on, the iCarly cast watches a real Fred video from his YouTube channel. But towards the end of the episode, we see a new Fred video that the gang makes together, presented as if it's a video that Fred puts out inside the iCarly universe, but not in the real world. What's interesting about this is that it's the first Fred appearance not written by Lucas or his family, and it doesn't feel quite right. The writers apparently were under the impression that the whole appeal of Fred is a guy with a high voice saying non sequiturs, and that's mostly what they present.
I'm hiding under a Toyota. It's a sports utility vehicle. A cabbage! My mother ate my turtle! My bathroom is purple! I like to sniff cheese! Cheese!
Although on occasion it does feel like someone involved understands the character at least a little bit.
What if these noodles are Kevin's intestines? That'd make me so happy! My friends are here!
The weirdest thing about this episode to me will always be that it's basically an advertisement for Fred's YouTube channel, and a direct encouragement for the audience to go look up his material. And imagine being a kid going to this YouTube channel and seeing jokes about Fred's mom being in rehab and her being a prostitute and Fred abusing drugs and Fred stalking people and breaking into their houses. And now that I think about it, a lot of that stuff actually is in iCarly, but it's downplayed, man! Like, Nickelodeon endorsing this on the same level they would something they personally manufactured should have been a risk. But it really wasn't. But obviously, this was also probably a very big deal for Lucas. I mean, in almost no time, he had gone from a kid screaming in his bathroom at a camcorder to someone being put on prime-time television. And on that note, this might be a very good chance to talk about his other main appearance on national television, and on a completely different network. The Disney Channel. Hannah Montana is one of those shows that was so massive at the time, so impossible to avoid. And yet today, it kind of feels mostly faded from the public mindset. So for those of you who weren't there, or maybe have forgotten most of the details, here's a quick rundown. Miley Cyrus plays Miley Stewart, an ordinary girl who lives a secret double life. By day, attending a boring school and trying to become one of the popular kids, and by night, putting on a blonde wig to become international pop sensation Hannah Montana. Your typical sitcom hijinks ensue. She meets the president, she dates her brother, she meets the Jonas Brothers, she dates her brother, she struggles to adjust to the schedules between her two lives, there's an episode where she dates her brother, you know, just the typical stuff you see in any of these shows. Anyways, in this episode specifically, Hannah gets a voice acting job working on a parody of Disney films, which is kinda weird because it's a Disney production, but whatever. It's in the recording studio that she meets Kyle McIntyre, one of the most talented voice actors in the industry.
Ranny Goat, Claude the Krabby Cow, and Frankie the Frantic Field Mouse. Hello, Hannah.
Not in the mood.
I like cheese!
The only problem is that Hannah quickly figures out that she's not a good voice actress, which is actually kind of a bit of meta humor, as Miley Cyrus isn't a good regular actress. So Miley tries to practice the role in private, and after speaking with Kyle about her struggles in the role, he suggests a duck voice specialist. And that specialist, get this, is a duck. Now, isn't that funny? And so Hannah spends an hour running around with this duck pretending to also be a duck, and then she goes in and she gives another really bad voice performance. She initially gives up after this, but after being pressured by her father, decides that she can't give in that easily, eventually impersonating a teacher at her school and finally giving the best performance that she can.
You can do it, Dada! You can fly! You can fly! Look at me! I'm flying! I'm flying!
The director says it's 1,000,000 times better than where she started and promptly fires her because it still sucks. Kyle runs away from secondhand embarrassment and Miley learns an important lesson. She can't act. Dun 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 dun. So when I first heard that Lucas was on this show, I went out and got a copy of a bunch of episodes and I put one of them on and I watched it and then I realized I had put on the wrong episode. And so I watched a different episode, and I watched that, and then I realized that was also the wrong episode, and so then I put on a third episode, and that one was the right one. And what I discovered during that whole little miniature adventure is that this show blows chunks. Honestly, I mean this, it is horrible. Like, unwatchably bad. One thing I noticed that's really insufferable is sometimes the writers will start a scene, and then they'll basically tell you the punchline to a joke, and then they'll tell the joke again really, really, really slowly. And the show is like insultingly dull and uninteresting and lame, except for this one kid. For some reason, he always gets the funny bits.
I'd like to see them ignore me now. Dance, monkeys, dance!
But do you know what's hilarious? When I was watching these 3 episodes and I realized that I hate this show and that it causes me personal pain, the very first thing I thought of was, oh, I should make this a new subscriber goal. Like, if we get to 1 million subscribers by the end of the year, I'll review all of Hannah Montana. You know, 'cause I hate myself. If I've learned anything about myself in the past year, it's that I am so absolutely constantly energized to get that number to go up instead of down that I will walk on broken glass if I'm assured that will do it. But anyways, how I feel about this show doesn't really matter. What really matters is how Lucas felt about the show. Because just imagine for a moment how euphoric this experience must have really felt. Imagine being a 13-year-old in 2006 and being such a Miley Cyrus fanboy that you buy concert tickets and brag that you're the only boy there who knows all of the lyrics. Being someone who makes dance videos and tribute vlogs about Hannah Montana, and then just 3 years later, you're in the Hannah Montana show. You're acting with Miley Cyrus and getting to hang out with her all day. And all because you uploaded a funny video to YouTube? And that's what makes the Fred story so crazy to me. And really, this is just a small sampling of all of the ways that Lucas's life was about to change forever. But despite his year being bookended by these 2 major appearances on rival networks, Lucas spent most of his time in 2009 producing regular, low-budget Fred videos back at home. And so let's stop now and look back at the 2009 Fred arc, and what happened during that final year before everything changed. So in the first video of 2009, we find out that Fred hasn't been posting videos because his grandmother briefly sent him to boarding school after his mother relapsed into her destructive tendencies. However, Fred is expelled for, quote, doing a sassy photo shoot, and he returns home to live with his mother once again. There's a lot of small things that happen this year that don't end up mattering in the long run because this is basically the final year of Fred being presented like this. For instance, in Fred Goes to the Doctor, the character claims that he was actually born in a bar, because his mother was still partying despite being pregnant with him. Also, in numerous videos, it is repeated time after time that Fred's mother, quote, works the corners, a phrase that he doesn't really understand, but keeps repeating. Throughout the year, Fred's unhinged nature materializes not only as tantrums like before, but also in occasional moments where he fantasizes about violent things happening to Kevin and Judy.
You know what? I'd like to see Kevin work out. I'd like to see him lift up weights and ride bikes hardcore. I'd also like to see Kevin sweat blood.
Fred also apparently begins creating drawings of himself doing very bad things to Kevin, which causes alarm at school and leads to a therapist being sent to evaluate him. The therapist suggests that Fred continue to see her, believing that he has deeply embedded issues. But he rejects this. And furthermore, when Fred's mother learns that he told his therapist about her working the corners, she states that Fred cannot take therapy if it means their family secrets are exposed. In the video Fred on April Fool's Day, we're delivered what is one of my favorite pieces of Fred lore nuggets, even if it really only has purpose or context in the 2009 run and nowhere else. The episode plays out like you'd expect. Fred comes home from school one day complaining that kids in class were pranking him because it's the 1st of April.
Actually, today Judy was like, Fred, will you go out with me? And I was like, oh my god, yes! But unfortunately, she said April Fool's Day after that, so, I was kind of embarrassed a little.
Fred attempts to get back at Judy and Kevin by playing April Fool's pranks on them in return. However, both pranks are cruel and outside of the logical limits of the holiday, such as telling Judy that her dog died and throwing a cat with rabies into Kevin's face. Again. Afterwards, Fred admits to the camera that he thinks he might have gone a little bit too far.
I don't know, I just think I brought it up one notch too far, you know? But whatever, it's April Fool's Day, for gosh darn sake. What is that?
It turns out that Fred's mother has set out these lifeless heads as a prank on him, saying that he deserves it for being so mean to Judy and Kevin. And you'd think that that would be the last time you'd hear about that, right? Wrong. In Fred Throws a Party, Fred throws a party at his house and calls everyone he knows to try and invite them over.
Hey, it's Fred and I'm having a party today, so I was wondering if you wanted to... No, I swear it will not lower your social status to come over to my house, please!
But no one shows up, and the party is completely empty until...
Oh, Fred, don't be sad. We'll come to your party. I even brought a balloon for the special occasion.
What's going on?
We just want to come to your party!
You can come! Just don't hurt me!
Yes. From this point forward, these mannequin heads are fully sentient and will talk to Fred and no one else. In the episode Fred Goes on a Date with Judy, Fred gets a call from a person he thinks is Judy asking him out on a date. It later turns out that this was a prank call from Kevin, but while he's waiting at Judy's place and believes that he's being stood up, he is visited by one of the heads.
I'll go on a date with you, Fred. I love you more than words can explain.
Oh! Okay, well I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Actually, I'm gonna get the heck out of here!
Why can't he just love me like I love him?
So this sort of brings us back around to the most iconic question of these Fred videos. Is this all real? How much of Fred's world as we see it is honestly legitimate? And how much of it is the character creating fake situations for us to see? Personally, I think it's a little bit of both. There's a point in one of these early 2009 videos where Fred is looking under a house porch and suddenly claims that underneath he saw a giant squid having babies. Once again, this is a reference to the character very potentially making up details about the things going on around him because, well, that's what kids do sometimes. So it is very probable that a lot of the stories Fred describes are twisted or inaccurate to the real events. However, it's my opinion that Fred does not manipulate the footage of these vlogs. He doesn't go back in and dub scenes to imply another person is in the room, or go back in and delete parts he doesn't like. So when we hear his mother or Judy or Kevin, those people are actually there, even though they're also just Lucas's voice being pitch shifted. However, it's also worth questioning if we really are perceiving events through a totally true lens, or if we're essentially seeing the world as Fred sees it. It's possible that the talking doll heads only exist in Fred's mind, and that we see them too because that's the perspective that these vlogs secretly take. I mean, watching through the series, you basically already have to accept that this 16-year-old does not look how he physically seems to, as he's supposed to be 10 years younger and apparently wearing braces. So maybe not everything is as it appears to be. 2009 was also the year that the Fred channel reached the milestone of 1 million subscribers, which was something that no one else on YouTube had managed to do before. To celebrate, Lucas recorded a brief video where he thanked the audience out of character as himself. Just regular old Lucas Cruikshank. The video then cuts to an appearance from the Fred character, who references Lucas's cameo directly.
And I'm really creeped out because I have no clue who that weird guy was right before this, you know, that weirdo?
This is the first time we see Fred make meta-commentary on his own existence as a character while referencing Lucas as a separate person. And even if this wasn't meant to be canon, the idea of Lucas and Fred being separate characters becomes mildly important towards the end of this saga. Real quick, here's a few more short videos worth mentioning from the 2009 run. In Fred Gets Dissed at Bible School, Fred's mother takes him to Bible school because she hopes that if they both find God, it will cure her alcoholism. There, most of the kids are cruel to Fred by making jokes about how he's so year one. I'm pretty confident this video might secretly be an ad for the movie Year One.
I mean, I don't know if you've heard of the movie, but there's this movie called Year One that's coming out in the middle of June, and I guess there's like a bunch of jokes that go along with the movie or something.
In Fred Goes Fundraising, Fred tries to sell pizzas for his school so he can win the reward of a bean share that will go to whoever can sell the most, where he runs into a few characters around town who are quite unsuitable.
Hi, Chester!
Hey, little boy, come closer, little boy, come closer.
Hi, well, I'm selling pizzas for my school. Do you want to get some?
Oh, that sounds really nice. I'll buy some. You just have to come to my house with me because I left my money back there.
Oh, that sounds kind of weird. I mean, my mom said I should never go to your house specifically because she's heard some really nasty things about you, so...
It'll be our little secret.
I'm leaving!
And finally, in Fred Gets a Letter from His Dad, Fred gets a letter in the mail which he thinks is from his father, finally getting back to him about the mail which he sent the previous year. In the letter, his father proclaims that he loves Fred, something which brings him much joy as he's never had a parent who loved him before. However, when he reaches the end of the note, he finds out that it was actually sent by Kevin.
P.S. Haha, this is Kevin, stupid. I can't believe you fell for that, Figglehorn. Wow! Kevin!
2009 was truly the year that Fred reached somewhat of a peak in popularity, perhaps due partially to his appearances on Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel. As one example, a study I managed to find from the end of this year analyzing the top searches done by children found that Fred was the 24th most searched topic for boys and the 18th most searched topic for girls, staying ahead of Wikipedia, Webkinz, Selena Gomez, and porn. And in 2009, that popularity was recognized in two major ways. The first being the release of a lot of Fred merchandise. So, for this project, I actually got my hands on as much Fred merchandise as I possibly could, because I was trying really hard to get into the mindset of like a Fred fan in 2009 that was obsessed with the character and wanted to have everything related to him. And I was curious, like, what aspects of the Fred brand would they try and market to kids in like a material product? And just generally, I find these cultural artifacts to be really fascinating. First of all, I have a bunch of Fred pins. Now, these are all pretty cool, but this is the one that I was the most happy to get my hands on. Okay, so from what I understand, this is probably one of the first pieces of Fred merchandise. This is a Figglehorn 08 pin. It's Fred on a pin with an American flag, and he's doing the Nixon thing. And this is in reference to the storyline from 2008 where Fred runs for class president. And he actually wears this pin in the video, and it's my understanding that you could order these on the Fred website. And I don't know, I just think this is a magical, weird artifact to have around. You know, people come over and I'm like, do you know what I gotta show you? This Fred Figglehorn for President 2008 pin. I also got these Fred wristbands for when your wrists are all sweaty. I got some Fred playing cards. I got a Fred keychain. I got a Fred talking pen. And I got the Fred board game. Now this is an interesting thing to me. I feel like we should stop and talk about this for a little bit. According to what I understand, this is basically like Candyland, but all the spots are Fred quotes. I mean, imagine going to a party in 2009 and the kids are having a fight over who gets to be blue shirt Fred and who gets to be red shirt Fred, or even the rarely seen green shirt Fred and pink shirt Fred. Oh my god, I'm reading through the rules. To win the game, you have to answer Fred trivia. Question, what does Fred tell Judy on April Fool's Day? Answer, her dog got run over. Question, where does Fred's father live? Answer, the state penitentiary. So not only do you have to approach this game with a knowledge of Fred lore, but you can't be tainted by the later Fred retcons, or else some of your answers are gonna be wrong. I bought these off some like shady website. I initially thought they were like stress balls, but I think they're noisemakers, but they don't make noise anymore. On the front of these is like always a picture of Fred's face, and then on the back is like one of his many catchphrases from the early days. So this one says, "Don't be sour." This one says, "What's up, homie G?" which was Fred's catchphrase for when he was trying to sound black. And this one says, "No offense." And I love this one because you would never guess this design is supposed to be Fred. You would always presume that it's supposed to be like like Shane Dawson or Leafy or something. Then of course we got the joke books. If I don't mention these, people are gonna bring up that I didn't show the joke books, but they're kind of later in the timeline. And what I like about these is they show how clearly, by the end, Lucas did not look like Fred at all. Like, he just didn't look like Fred. But the piece de resistance of Fred collectibles were, of course, the Fred plushies. Now, these were put out in about 2009, and they were basically the first YouTuber plushies, which obviously that's like an overstated thing now, like everyone has a plushie these days. But I mean, back in 2009, that was a big deal, and these were released in places like Target. Now, I believe there were about 4 of these released in total, but I only have 3. The normal red shirt Fred kind of slipped through my fingers, but on that note, let's go ahead and talk about the ones that I do have and kind of what they are. First of all, we have the blue shirt toothbrush Fred. This is a reference to the episode where he brushes his teeth right before he goes to the dentist. Next, we have a pool party Fred. This is a reference to the episode where he builds a little pool in his backyard and goes swimming in it. This is probably one of the better ones to get just because it's instantly recognizable what this is supposed to be. And then this is the straight jacket Fred. This is the first one I bought. This is not a reference to any specific Fred video from the time, but it kind of represents like the vague cultural idea of what Fred was supposed to be, and I think that's interesting. And what I love about it is there's no Fred on his shirt. So when you look at this without like the branding, you have no idea what this is supposed to be. So if someone sees this in your house and asks, "Hey, what is this?" you can make up a lie. Now, these are supposed to be talking dolls, so there's supposed to be a thing in the hand that when you press it, it makes a noise or says something or something like that. But I mean, sadly the batteries in these are pretty old, so it's kind of like... Holy shit. The other notable thing that happened in 2009 was that Nick officially started to treat Fred as part of the Nickelodeon brand. And in November of that year, a Fred movie officially began filming and was sold to Nickelodeon shortly afterwards. This movie is infamous for being one of the most miraculous turnarounds in recent history. It was written in 4 weeks, filmed in about a month, and a completed edit was finished around 6 months later. From the film being greenlit to a completed edit being done was essentially about 10 months. The most interesting thing about this movie, at least to me in this instant, is the same thing that I've been saying this whole time, really. It was 100% a complete reboot of the established Fred canon, and it would come to define how Fred would be perceived in the popular culture for the rest of time. The most obvious thing being that the off-screen lore characters were developed into real performances by the time it hit the small screen. But the most notable thing about Fred the movie is that it substantially aged up the entire cast. In the original canon, as you'll remember, Fred, Judy, and Kevin are all supposed to be 6 years old and in kindergarten. But in the final movie, they are supposed to be 15 and are played by adult actors, with the exception of Lucas, who was only 16 at the time. This is an alteration to the lore that I am not 100% sure that I am fond of, because it totally recontextualizes Fred's purpose and directive. Early Fred is supposed to be a child who is extremely innocent but emotionally damaged, giving a warped view of a cruel world around him. The fact that he's 6 years old is one of the core defining aspects of his character. It's why his voice is high-pitched, it's why he gets upset over things that probably don't really matter, it's why he doesn't understand complex topics like his mother working the corners. And when you take that character and place him into a high school setting without changing a single thing about him, it completely changes how the writers end up presenting him in the final product. To put it lightly, Nickelodeon-era Fred is intended to be a teenager who has a developmental disorder, which I feel like is a joke that has aged phenomenally less well than the original Fred character. Which, if you were a filmmaker, which I'm not by the way, but if you were a filmmaker and you had to make a movie about Fred, I can understand why you would do it this way. I mean, the alternatives are A, have Fred be played by an actual child, B, have everyone in the cast be teenagers and adults and have them all pretend they're in preschool, or C, have Lucas be the only cast member who isn't in preschool as he sort of romantically frets over one of the preschool actors. And look, I've seen Grow Up Timmy Turner. I think we can all recognize that turned out to be a bad idea. But it is interesting that Fred the movie basically represents the entire pop culture understanding of what Fred is. One of my friends recently pointed out to me that Fred the movie has actually had a far more culturally remarkable presence and afterlife than any of the mainstream stuff that Fred was paid to advertise. Which is funny, but true. Think about it. Out of City of Ember, Year One, and Fred the Movie, which of these three films do you think about the most? Anyways, before I get into analyzing and reviewing this Nickelodeon TV movie from 2010, I want to talk about the effect that this script had on the Fred YouTube channel before it even came out, really. Think of it like this. Fred the Movie wrapped filming on December the 20th, 2009. It then aired on September 18th, 2010. So, for those 9 months, Lucas was left in a limbo where he had filmed the script, knew that it was going to essentially reboot the Fred canon, but no one in his fan base knew that was the case yet. And so the YouTube videos that he filmed after Fred the movie had wrapped, but before it came out, were totally different from anything he had made up to that point. First of all, there was a mild budget allocated for things like on-location shoots, a cameraman, and most importantly, actors for Lucas to perform off of.
Hey, Mayor, did you buy those books?
No, I didn't buy them.
Oh, she didn't buy the books. She's a book thief. Come back here, lady. You have to buy those books.
Secondly, previous Fred videos up to this point had operated off of building up a lore and then continuing to reference said lore through specific callbacks. That's where you get things like Judy, Kevin, the talking doll heads, the cat with rabies, etc., etc. But none of those things feature heavily in this set of videos, and I presume because Lucas was producing these explicitly so they could be set in either the classic Fred canon that his audience understood, or the Nickelodeon reboot, which was approaching like a bullet train. Some of the most memorable videos from this era include the one where Fred is left alone at a hair salon and begins cutting the hair of the customers.
Finally! Someone understands my style!
I knew you'd love it.
Whatever that is, I want.
The one where he goes to the store, fills up his cart with junk, and ends up meeting the annoying orange.
Knock, knock. I'm gonna squeeze you to death if you don't tell me who's there.
The one where Fred wanders around a music studio and eventually meets Weezer.
Oh, it's just Weezer. Weezer? Oh my god, it's Weezer!
And the one where he sneaks into an adult movie that he isn't old enough to see.
We're all gonna see Nightmare on Sesame Street!
Very, very few of these videos were made when compared to the previous Fred seasons, but these actually tend to be the videos that a lot of people associate with the channel, just because it's a little more memorable to see him in these real locations interacting with real people. This was also the year that Fred cameoed on the Annoying Orange YouTube channel, in a skit where they're both put into a fighting ring and asked to annoy each other to death.
Wow, your favorite food must be Scream of Wheat.
But soon, the inevitable came to pass, and Fred the movie finally premiered on Nickelodeon. There's two things you need to know about this starting off. Firstly, it was a critical bomb. Today it has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and many tout this as one of the film's most cemented legacies, even being one of the first things that Wikipedia tells you. It also, by all accounts, was a total commercial success. Everyone I've spoken to about this who was around at the time remembers seeing this at some point. Hell, I remember sitting down to watch it, and I was a cynical internet teen who thought he was above the culture. Fred the Movie was the second highest viewed TV movie on cable, not for the week, not for the month, but for the entirety of 2010. It was only barely beat out by Camp Rock 2, which had about 300,000 more viewers, and it actually came really close to having the same number of viewers that High School Musical did when it premiered. So there was definitely this interesting dichotomy of the time, where older people, parents, established reviewers, they did not understand this movie or the appeal of Fred, and just thought it was mind-numbing, humorless screaming that no one with a developed mind could possibly understand. And meanwhile, younger people, like I was at the time, walked away feeling like the film was a slightly awkward yet surprisingly funny and wholesome take on a piece of YouTube content that shouldn't have adapted nearly as well as it did. And personally, 11 years later, I still think the latter opinion is the one that I have. Fred the Movie has this reputation of being one of the worst films ever made. Again, with a 0% critics rating, that's something that's hard to avoid. But watching through it, I found that take to be really confusing because this movie is so interesting to me. Like, it's such a fascinating gem of a thing. And maybe that's just because I've fully immersed myself in the context of why it exists. But I've never understood why movies that are so strange and worth studying end up on the lists of the worst things ever. I think that hate watching has drastically altered our opinion on what the worst really is. Like, if a movie makes you laugh, if you have a good time sitting through it, then in my opinion, by basic definition, it cannot be the worst of anything. But I don't even think that Fred the Movie is only good on an ironic level. I think the stuff I like and find interesting is the stuff that the writer and director wanted me to enjoy. But we should be absolutely clear here that it is entirely possible that I just have a pretty substantial bias. In fact, when I sat down to watch this with my friend Hippie Rat, I actually joked to him that I wanted to like this movie more than anything else in the world. I really hope I like this movie. I hope we end up loving this movie because I kind of have this image in my head where I want to talk about the Fred movies in the exact same way that, like, Zack Snyder fans talk about every movie that Zack Snyder has ever made. Incidentally, a quick shout out to Hippie Rat for actually sitting aside the time to sit through these movies with me the week that we did this. He's been a really supportive guy this year, he's one of the main reasons that I've gotten content out at all, and he's just a great friend. Hippie Rat actually has a YouTube channel that I'm trying to go out of my way to plug every time that he helps me make a video. Right now, he's actually working on a retrospective about a really obscure Nickelodeon show called The Troop, which I've never heard of, but I've been told a lot of people have nostalgia for. So if you want to see someone cover that entire series from start to finish, consider going down to his channel and hitting that subscribe button. He's really close to 5,000 subscribers, and I think this'll be the day we get him the rest of the way. Anyways, let's break down the story of Fred the Movie, the mistakes of Fred the Movie, and most importantly, the lore of Fred the Movie. And this is like the most softly tragic thing in the world. Fred has been so hurt, so bruised by this experience, that even screaming isn't something that he can bring himself to do. Of course, then he turns around and starts screaming anyways.
That was so humiliating!
But you know, it's still like a touching moment before that.
Stop! Stop right now, Doug! Stop!
Hey guys, it's Doug. So yeah, my name is Doug, and my last name is Durkee, so now you know my full name. So if you're an online predator, then I'm pretty much in a bad position right now because I just told you my full name.
There's this weird thing I've noticed, that the longer that Fred continued to exist, and the more that Lucas tried to evolve as a creator, he kept accidentally inventing Filthy Frank.
Teachers, counselors, therapists, they're always telling me that high school is the best years of your life and that I should embrace these years. My life's going to suck if these are the best years of my life.
The other day, I was in math club, and my friend Kevin told me, dude, you need to join something cooler. Something cooler? The fuck is cooler than a math club?
And you want to go back and be like, honey, you're trying so hard, but you're like 5 years too early. Sadly, Doug Durkee did not catch on like Lucas wanted him to, but this motivation for him to use the Fred YouTube channel to prove that he could play other characters did not fade. One thing worth quickly highlighting before we move on is Fred's musical career. I discovered this phenomenon when I was looking for Fred merchandise to buy, and I just found these albums, like on eBay, that no one wanted. They were super cheap, but these are the 2 Fred musical albums. One was a Christmas album, 2009's It's Hackin' Christmas with Fred, and one was a party album, 2010's Who's Ready to Party with Fred. And so yeah, I sat down and I listened to both of these in full all the way through, and I totally don't regret it. No, it was worth it. There's some gems on these. Don't you guys want to hear the incredible party song, Girls Are From Uranus?
Girls like to smell so nice. In a month, guys would rather shower once or twice. Yeah! Girls like to shop, guys like to fart. Girls are from Uranus.
No, there's some interesting notable stuff on here. He recorded a knockoff of the Total Drama Island theme. Is that interesting? I mean, it is kind of interesting that the 2009 album describes the plot of the YouTube channel, including mentioning things like the Talking Heads, and then the 2010 album describes the plot of the movie, down to mentioning things like him digging to China and he when he visits the damn, this really is not interesting at all. Oh my god. No, these are insufferable albums. Really, they contribute nothing. They were clearly made by people who just wanted to make money off the brand. But one notable thing about these albums, something that actually contributed something to the lore, is that the second album features a song about Fred being scared of someone in his life being a vampire.
There's something strange about this babysitter. She called the blood bank and asked if they deliver. I've seen Twilight. Believe me, it left an impression.
The Babysitter's a Vampire, being one of the first pieces of Fred media to come out after the movie, was the direct inspiration for the direct-to-TV sequel, Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred. This movie has one of those covers from the time where it's like if you move it a little bit, the image changes. So one of the images is Fred looking scared, and one of the images is Fred as a vampire. So when you do this, it's like it keeps changing between Fred being scared and Fred being a vampire. This is the most interesting thing about the movie.
In Fred 3, Camp Fred, Fred wishes to visit a popular and luxurious camp named Camp Superior, but his dreams are dashed when his mom takes him to Camp I Want a Pee-Pee instead. Upon arrival, he meets head counselor Floyd Spunkmeyer, played by Tom Arnold. His peers include Magoo, Chatter, Spoon, and Dig. He also encounters a beautiful but incompetent Russian nurse named Oksana. It turns out that Camp I Want a Pee-Pee and Camp Superior have been competing in summer camp games for 69 years, and that Superior has always won. Fred tries asking his father John Cena for advice, but John Cena tells Fred that he's on his own. Fred uncovers a plot to drug the food of I Want a Pee-Pee campers in order for a giant rat to eat their brains in a place called the Rat's Hole. Avoiding the gruel, he instead eats psychedelic red berries and throws up when the others find him. Magoo, Chatter, Spoon, and Dig go to the Rat's Den because it's a hideout they've had since being in camp. The drug that was put in the gruel was actually super vitamins because the gruel is that bad. Fred finds out that Kevin is a camp superior and becomes determined to beat them at the competition. But alas, I Want a Pee-Pee loses. However, much to everybody's surprise, I Want a Pee-Pee wins the next day. For the next contest, Kevin and Camp Superior perform a song and dance routine. Kevin isn't worried about Fred winning because he's horrible at singing, but just in case, Kevin put a huge tank of gruel backstage to hit Fred with. When it's Fred's turn to sing, he goes on and sings the loser song. It goes down like gangbusters and everybody starts cheering. Camp I Want a Pee-Pee wins the summer camp games. The gruel backfires on Kevin and he loses his clothes and is laughed off stage. The campers leave for summer and Fred tells his mom that he's made some new friends. Fred's mom has made a new friend too. The pizza delivery guy.
That's right. This is it. No more teasing. No more empty promises. The next time I see you guys, we will be talking about iCarly. I know it must seem crazy how long this has taken me to turn around, but when you guys see the scale of what I have planned here, I think you're going to understand why it's taken so much planning. I'm kind of really, really anxious to finally get into this. Now, I wish I could concretely say exactly when I'm going to get this out, you know what I mean? I wish I could say a date and a time so we could all just get excited around that exact moment, but the real answer is it's going to be out when it's done. We're working around the clock. I got so many editors on this, and I'm just constantly working, and you know, if we get it done tomorrow, I'm posting it tomorrow, and I'm just working so hard on it, but it's difficult making a video that is so long that it's approaching potentially turning into the longest video you've ever made, and also knowing that you have to get that out as soon as you can because it might be the most important video you've ever made. You know what I mean? I want to give a big thanks again to GlassesUSA.com, the sponsor of this video. Please check out GlassesUSA.com right now if you want to get your best deals on prescription and non-prescription frames and sunglasses. I'm not lying when I say this. GlassesUSA.com is honestly one of my favorite sponsors to do because I just tell people about them all the time. I'll have a friend that's like, these glasses aren't working too well for me. And I'll go like, hey, have you heard of GlassesUSA.com? The most, I just start this spiel because I'm honestly, excited about this website on and off the site. I mean, I wear these things every day. If I didn't feel this way about the brand, I wouldn't wear their frames every day, you know what I mean? So if you guys want to check these guys out, they're in the top of the description, and all the frames that I wore in this video are linked a little bit below that. They support the channel, and they're just awesome in general, so I want to encourage you guys to support them forever and eternally. Now that the Patreon crawl is running, I want to send out a big thanks to my guest editors for this episode. I wish I could name you all, but it's looking concretely the case that before this is done, I'm going to hire more people. So you're going to be in the crawl, and I appreciate you all. And second of all, a big thanks to my Patreon supporters who pledge money to the channel to help me keep the train rolling. And you guys are the reason I've been able to hire editors to get this video and the iCarly videos out, hopefully in June. We're going to see what we can get done. But if you want to support the channel, if you want to help me out on this mini-series and make sure that I can get this out before the damn revival starts, consider supporting me on consider supporting me on Patreon. It means the world to me, and I love everyone who supports me there. I really do. You're all so sweet. Also, special thanks, obviously, to Hippie Rat and Wyatt Duncan. These are two small-time YouTubers who have been supporting the channel for years and years, and I love having them on, so, whenever they help me out with a video like this, I hope you guys go over, give them some love, give them some support, watch some of their videos, including, Hippie Rat, who is working on his who's working on his video about the troop, and then Wyatt Duncan, who has a Garf Gab going on. I still believe he does. So if you want to thank the people who support the channel and help me make stuff like this, you can find all of those people in the description down below. Give all my editors and all my guests a lot of love because they didn't have to help me out, and they did, and it meant so much. I hope I'll see you guys next time, and that there is a bit of anticipation for what's about to start on the channel. And with that, I guess all that's left to say is, I've been Quinn Reviews, and that's all you need.